The tips that I would like to give producers, although I still don't think I'm qualified to give anyone tips, but I think the thing that's changed the most is that you can show your work now. Producing, you used to pretty much be stuck with you had to sell it to somebody in order to get it made, and then people be like, wow, that was a good idea. You're like, yeah, I knew that was a good idea 15 years ago, asshole. Like, why do I have to wait? Now, with digital filmmaking, with the wealth of people who know what the hell they're doing with cameras and editing, I actually think what the internet and YouTube, Vimeo, whatever, I think there's a show that was on Vimeo called High Maintenance that I thought was pretty funny, that those guys, in my opinion, that's what the internet, and that's what I am telling producers is, and I don't mean this, I'm being funny hopefully, but don't spend your money on conferences, go home, spend your money, make something, get it out there. And guys like me are scouring the world for anything that has resonance with the audience, so we're looking for it, and you have that opportunity. Now that creates a weird bar, because if you do it and you put it out on the internet and nobody watches it, now, it's harder for you. But that's the world we're in right now, is sort of how are we going to sell stuff? I think that's the number one thing producers, and I fit this into the reality show, was we got to figure out how to market. We got to figure out how to market ourselves better. People should know who the producers are, because we're the ones that carry these projects up the mountain. I mean, it's hard. I haven't done it well myself. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've had some big marketing companies get behind projects I've done, and very few people ended up seeing them. And so part of that could be, wow, I must have picked bad projects. I think they're pretty good. I like The Chair. Promised Land was a movie I did with Matt Damon that I liked, and I think it's very hard to cut through. I think we've almost done ourselves a disservice. There's too much media. We're all out there, every one of you in this room probably got tweeted 15 things you could watch tonight while I've been talking. I've only been here 1 minute. And there's no way you can watch 15 things. So how are you going to make that decision? And I think the experts in the field need to start saying what really should get made and what shouldn't get made and what needs to get done. And I'm not saying that's me, but I'm saying that the audience needs help. We're killing them right now. We're burying them with stuff, and they don't know how to pick. And I think producers actually have a great ability to do that, because you're starting much earlier and you've been riding these projects for your career. The guys I was on the panel with, they could easily tell you what happens with reality show. I can talk about reality shows or movies or scripted shows. It takes a long time, and you got to know. And so the audience, in my opinion, needs to be educated. That's why I do shows like Project Greenlight and The Chair. And look, we know more about food today than we did 10 years ago, right? People know a shitload more about exercise than they did 10 years ago. I don't see any reason why they don't know more about storytelling. Who's a good storyteller? Who's a bad storyteller? What kind of stories do I like? What kind of stories don't I like? 10 years ago, if somebody said there's arugula in the salad, I would have no idea what they were talking about. So it's just lettuce. And they're like, no, this is a special kind of lettuce. Now I can tell you, what, I like this kind of lettuce in my salad. Well, I think people should say, I think Jim Cameron's pretty good at telling stories. So you know what, I'm gonna go watch, I think J.J. Abrams knows how to tell a story. That should matter, not Tom Cruise or whatever else, because those are the guys telling the stories. So that's my goal as a producer over the next 20 years, is try to make producers and writers and the people who are actually getting these things made much more able to be the marketing force behind them. Well, the show The Chair is coming out for its second window, as they call it today, on a channel called Fusion in July. So we're doing a bunch of additional programming and social media and some of this marketing stuff. Like, I can't stand up here and tell other people to do it. I got to go do it. So we're going to try to push the hell of it out there. I'm trying to push a little bit more of myself and just say, look, this is what I've done. You might like some of the stuff I did. The holy grail of marketing is to get an audience that believes in you enough, whether you're a company, a brand, a person, whatever, that they'll try out the next thing you do, right? So I'm going to try to put myself out there. I got a little talk show that's going to be online about Hollywood and entertainment and stuff I'm going to start doing. And so that's a big part of my focus. And then there's a couple things we're casting right now. So as like every project, once you get the actors, then it works itself out. So hopefully those are good. And I have one movie called Manchester by the Sea that's in post, just wrapped. Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams and Kyle Chandler, and it was written and directed by Kenny Lonergan. And it's a great little movie, but we'll see. Drama's tough right now. One of the things that makes me really sad, and I see it in this conference particularly, is that when you hit a certain level of success, it becomes your job. And no matter what, there's a different attitude you have towards your job than you do when you're trying to get your project made, or you're trying to get your first movie made, or you're trying to do whatever it is. And I think that actually affects it in a weird way, which is like a self-fulfilling prophecy that you get to a certain level of success where theoretically you should be able to get all these projects that you really believe in made, but because it becomes your job, you start getting more and more infiltrated by the people you're selling to, the networks or the movie stars or the the movie studios. And when I come to these things, it's funny because they look at us, guys have made some stuff you've heard of, and they're like, wow, I'd love to be that guy, I'd love to do whatever. We're all looking at you going, oh yeah, I gotta remember how fun this job is, because man, does it suck right now. Or I gotta remember how badly people would love to do what I'm doing, not in an arrogant way, just in a, yeah, it is cool, I get to do this. But the pressure, when you have Good Will Hunting on your resume or American Pie or whatever, the pressure to keep trying to hit that, or in your own head where you're like, well, I guess it's not really a success if it doesn't do that, right? I think that's the sad part about the business, is you sort of lose your perspective on it. So trying to stay grounded is hard. So I really like coming back and meeting people. I also find that the people who are entering or trying to figure it out or working harder actually have a better sense of what the real world is interested in watching. I think those of us, I'm not quite at this level, but I hang around with a lot of people. But you start living behind gates, you start flying private, you start doing stuff. And you're also famous and whatever. Nobody, I can still walk in a Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee and nobody says anything. Occasionally there'll be some person who saw a green light or whatever. But I go out with Matt or Ben or some of my other friends. It's just a nightmare. You're not getting treated like a normal person anywhere. Well, that, no offense, but that fucks with you. Like, that changes your perspective, that changes everything. And so I think we still haven't figured out that part of our business. So it's great to see young people and new people, or people, older people who want to come into producing, or people have a story they really care about that they want to get told, because they actually have better perspective in some ways than a lot of us and that's why you see a lot of the bigger filmmakers end up doing basically fantasy. When was the last time Steven Spielberg did a real story, right? Like something based on real people. I was probably 8 years old, right? Because that guy's been Steven Spielberg my entire life. Like, there's not a person who's ever interacted with him had no idea he was Steven Spielberg in 25 years, right? Now, I don't know Steven, so if this ever gets out there and everybody's like, well, he's bad, I'm not bad-mouthing Steven. I love his movies, right? I think he's great at it, but I'm just saying at a certain point, I think it might be hard for Steven to sit down and make a little movie like Whiplash. And you only have so many real stories. If you're doing stories you care about. I developed a project recently with John Singleton, and I thought Boys in the Hood was one of the best movies came out in sort of my movie career. And the poor guy has to live under that pressure all the time, and now his job is to be a director. So like if he goes and just does an action movie or he does something else, people are like, oh, well, John's not changing society as we know it. And you're like, wait a minute, I can't do that on every single movie. Like, and so I think that's part of what's fun about these conferences. You get to meet people who are still very passionate and it hasn't yet become a job. And I almost feel like saying to people, don't let it become a job. Don't try to figure out how to, make things that you really care about, because once it becomes a job, it's a whole different game. My thing is, I'm from a little town in Maryland. This sounds so hokey and stupid, but I grew up, movies were my escape. It was a little town. My parents got divorced, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I can always see the violins coming out. No one should feel sorry for me, but movies meant a lot to me in television. And I watched a lot of it, and I think they have some value. And so for me, it's sort of positive. I like things that are somewhat positive, even if it's a horror movie or whatever. And I like stories and characters. And so if you have interesting characters or stories that a larger audience could like, I'd like to work on it, right? It's also, so that's sort of my bigger thing. I would say, obviously, some of the more successful ones are like American Pie or Good Will Hunting or, even Project Greenlight. We love those things, and they're very empowering, and Matt and Ben are empowering guys too, and it was really fun to be part of that. And it's really fun to be part of when people get a chance. I got a chance to live my dream, and it's fun to be around it. Sometimes we made some horribly bad decisions, and things that we were thinking about. And a lot of times it's creative alchemy. A lot of times, in all honesty, it's because you could get something made and you didn't actually put it through all the hoops of whether you should have gotten it made. And so you're just sort of like, well, this movie got made. And then you get to the screening and you're like, wow, this movie should not have gotten made. I don't actually have any on my resume that I would say shouldn't have gotten made. There's a few that I don't think we quite figured the script out on. There was a movie called Best Laid Plans. It was early in Reese Witherspoon and Josh Brolin's career that we did. That was a great little thriller, and we never quite figured out the ending on it, so it didn't quite play. Ben and I worked on a movie called Reindeer Games with Charlize, and John Frankenheimer directed it, and there ended up being some big plausibility holes that killed that thriller. I think a little bit. It could have been bigger than it was. It was very smart. One of the dumbest business decisions I ever made in my life was, people don't know this, I told this story earlier and it seemed to work, so I'm just going to repeat it here because I'm not that original, is one of the dumber decisions I ever made was I had this company with Matt Damon and Ben and Affleck and Sean Bailey, who's now president of Disney, and it was called Live Planet, and we had done this little show, Project Greenlight, and it's in its like second year, and people are like, wow, you guys are good at this. Let's spin stuff off of Project Greenlight. And we're like, all right, well, where are other places where people get wish fulfillment? We'll do. We had a first startup show before Shark Tank. We had books. We had plays. We did a show with Wayne Newton about Vegas shows and stuff on the E! channel. And then this one, we were sitting around, somebody came in our office and they're like, look, I got a great idea. It's about fashion. And people are out there, they love clothes, they're buying clothes. And as you can tell by the hoodie I'm wearing right now, it's not my forte. But we all looked at each other, we're like, well, okay, that's kind of a cool idea. And then we went out to Harvey, who was our partner on Greenlight, Harvey Weinstein, at the Weinstein Company now. We said, what about a fashion show? And we said, we're going to call it Project Runway. And so we're sitting there talking about it, and we're like, yeah, that's a good idea for the show, but we don't know a damn thing about fashion, and we don't really have any idea what we would do on the show. And we were like, me, Matt, and Ben, or God forbid, just Matt and Ben, judging fashion would be the dumbest show on earth. So we really need to give it to somebody else and let somebody, and we gave too much of it away, because had we kept that show, we probably would have been in a lot better place today than we are. And Harvey, I think, is still making a lot of money off Project Runway. But I think Heidi and Tim were the perfect choice. And the original showrunners, Dan and Jane, were great producers, and they turned it into a great show. But that was probably, that was a big, just flat out dumb business decision where I was like, I wouldn't watch that show, so why would anybody watch that show? And you're like, well, turns out people like that show a lot. So Runway was a mistake. I would say I have priorities that are a little different. So the other thing I'd say is I think producing, or this business in general, is brutal. I mean, all of you guys are in here. It's Sunday night. I'm sure you got family, friends, people you'd rather be with. And when I had my first child, or my wife had our first child, it was right when Matt got the Bourne movies. And probably one of the bigger financial mistakes was I didn't go produce those, because our daughter had just been born and I didn't want to travel the world. So you have these moments where, again, those would have been really fun to work on, but I didn't get to work on those. I took your original question about decisions I'd made or things I've been part of, but you also can get very unlucky. Like, I made a little, sort of horror movie with Clay Tarver and J.J. Abrams, and unfortunately Paul Walker was in it, and it's called Joyride. And we had a great time making it, and the movie's really good, and people liked it, and Fox, in their infinite wisdom, thought, 2 weeks after 9/11, we should put a horror movie out in theaters. And we were all in that first market meeting. We're like, what are you guys doing? Like, nobody wants to go be scared. We're all petrified someone's about to blow up our house. Like, well, we think it might be good counter-programming. It's really good. And you sit and you watch those things, and even if you're Chris Moore, as you say, you can't stop them. You can't, you look at them, and it's true. Not a soul went to see the movie in theaters, and it's grown, and we made a couple straight-to-video sequels and stuff. And so, people like it, and there's a core. But those are sort of decisions that get made that are way out of your control. And I think that's a hard thing about being producers, is you carry the thing from the beginning. It's like your child, and then you hand it off, and you're supposed to be all happy about handing it off. I'm sure my kids aren't this old yet, but I'm sure when you're like, yeah, they got into college, that's awesome, and you're like, the hell, now I'm just gonna be alone in my house, So it's a little bit like that, where you have to give them away, and directors take them over, and other stuff. And so, there's a lot of that goes on. It is not all Good Will Hunting and American Pie. Well, so here's the tip that I've gotten the most positive feedback over the years, that I will share on film here for the first time, or I'm sure there's actually not a shred of film in this room, but is that the hardest thing about producing is getting up and having to motivate yourself every day. And because at the beginning, no matter what, it won't be easy because you'll be the first, you'll have this idea, you'll be trying to do it. And what I always say to people, and it's something a big producer, Brian Grazer, who's Imagine Entertainment and other stuff, said to me when I first got in business. He said, you have to figure out something to do for at least an hour every day on the projects you care about. And if you can't find something to do to move the project forward for an hour, an hour's a long time. Like you can find something for 5 minutes, you can find something, but to actually figure out an hour's worth of stuff you could do to get that project moving forward, it's not a project you should pursue. And I think that's the hardest thing as producers is we're in the middle, you're heat-seeking missiles, oh, well, I got this girl, and she just had a Sundance movie, and this movie will be great. And none of that really works out. It's the ones you slog out. I mean, what people don't know, they think Matt and Ben walked into town, handed people a script, became Matt and Ben. I mean, they were here 6 years. Took us 4 years to get that movie made, right? Like, it's a hard business. And so you really got to figure out inside yourself what motivates you and what could you actually work on all by yourself, knocking down doors and calling people and doing whatever. And if you can't figure out 5 hours a week of how you by yourself, because what a lot of people do is like, well, I'm waiting for this guy to read it. I'm waiting for this person to read it. I'm like, okay, great, that can be on your list. You get 1 minute each hour of waiting. Okay, so now I got 5 minutes spent. So now I got 55 minutes left. What are you gonna do, right? Well, you can give it to 6 more people you're gonna wait for. Okay, now you got 40 minutes left. What are you gonna do, right? And I think that's really all it is producing, is you gotta figure out how it motivates you. And I think for some people, you gotta be honest, you don't have the motivation. That's not your style. That's not how you wanna live your life. Then don't be a producer. There you go.